Welcome back to On the Light, a podcast dedicated to illuminating the profound teachings and legacy of Yogacharya BKS Iyengar. I'm your host, Susan Johnson. In this episode, Lee and I are honored again to meet with Prashant Iyengar. Here, you will hear Prashant talk about Guruji's approach to teaching the students from the West, including how he taught violin player Yehudi Menuhin and other luminaries. He also discusses how when Guruji was practicing, he would observe and experiment. He would make himself like a novice student so that he could better understand how to teach them. You will also hear Lee talk about how Guruji was the best host and the best guest. And if you listen to episode 1, this is the episode where we hear why Krishnamacharya told Mr. Iyengar not to allow Prashant to read the Mundaka Upanishad. Please enjoy this episode of On the Light. When we had our first interview, you covered Guruji's early years and then what led, to yoga. And in the second interview, we discussed Guruji's practice and the first publication of Light on Yoga and how he came to write Light on Yoga. In interview 3, we continued with the arc of his practice. And we talked a lot about what Guruji meant when he said, "When I practice, I am a philosopher."
Okay.
In interview 4, you continued to tell us about Guruji's practice, and you explained why you and Gita never received formal teacher training from him. He didn't feel that the Indian teachers needed that. He really only felt that he needed to give that to the Western people.
Okay.
Kind of how the therapeutic classes got started. And also you talked about how he didn't really get to teach what he wanted to teach. Yeah. So I have a couple of questions.
Okay, before we go to the questions, let me add certain things here.
Okay.
Guruji's teachings radically changed. Radically changed. After he went to West, and then after a couple of years when he thought propagating yoga is to turn out teachers in West. He wanted to turn out teachers, and that's how he embarked upon certification program. So thereafter, he felt it is important, and very rightly so, that he should be teaching in that perspective that the students are going to become teachers sooner or later, because they will have to start teaching yoga to propagate yoga. He cannot be single-handedly going all over the world for entire year or years together. He would be able to spare 2-3 months. So his teachings, when certification aspect came up, he had to change his approach in teaching to the West. In India, he was not thinking to turn out teachers. But in the West, he had to think on turning out teachers. And therefore, he gave more importance to students in learning how to teach the yoga that they have learned. And much of the training started highlighting that aspect. So for the West, his teachings changed thereafter, because those students were potential teachers. And some of them were already certified, so they were actual teachers. So he had to help them, guide them to be teaching that yoga, which is in certification aspect of Iyengar yoga. So more stress came on postures, and then remedial aspects and the therapy aspects. More stress was given to that. While that was not necessary in India for him, because many of them have this kind of either vocal complaint or non-vocal complaint that why this was not taught to us when I'm teaching all these things. So many of them say that this was not taught to us. Why is it that we were not taught this? because my mission in my life has never been, I've never been turning out teachers. I have not turned out one single teacher in India. I was just trying to teach pure subject for the sake of students. I never had anyone in mind that this person should become a teacher, potential teacher, and then try to help that person. No, none. I have not done anything like that in last nearly 50 to 53 years of my teaching. But Guruji had to do that. So he could not be teaching many things which the students were not qualified to teach. Certified teachers were not qualified to teach philosophy, etc., etc. Therefore, he was trying to talk to them outside the domain of class. And he wanted them to come to know about what yoga is. As a matter of fact, he was expecting these sincere students to come and stay in India for a longer duration so that they can be learning the essential aspects of yoga, which he was not teaching for his whatever 2-3 weeks or a month abroad in various countries. Lee can tell you how long did he stay in the United States during his foreign tours between June and September. So he was hardly giving some weeks or whatever to various locations, and more important for him was to become resourceful for teachers to teach what they are teaching. That is postural yoga, that is remedial yoga, and popular asana pranayam, which is going to catch the whole world. Essential yoga won't be catching the whole world. He knew this. And therefore, he customized popular yoga, which will have appeal for common man, layman, and therefore they will be drawn towards yoga. So he thought of making the students more resourceful in their teachings. Now, all these certified teachers, most of them are teaching postural yoga, how to do a posture perfectly, the technical aspects of posture, then the sequencing of posture, then the remedial aspects, how to handle any case. So that became more important in the West. And therefore, his teaching for nearly those 30, 40 years in the West changed completely. Now you can understand why he did not teach us. He wanted us to become. He wanted us to learn by ourselves and become teachers. He did not feel like giving some spoon feeding, ready-made advices, so that in that case we would have become quack teachers. A slip disc problem, he did not guide us. For slip disc, take this. For gynec problem, take that. He never gave such things. Whereas for the Western teachers, he had to give because he stayed for a very short time. And they were not coming to stay with him. He wanted sincere students to come and stay with him in India for a longer duration rather than 1 month. But they made a formality to come for his birthday month in December and be there for a month and then go away because they had commitments. They were teachers. They could not be taking long leaves and come here for 6 months and 8 months because they were already in a profession of teaching. So he understood later that they cannot be coming because already they are in a profession. And they cannot take off or take leave. So his teaching for the West totally changed post formalization of certifications. And prior to that, yoga was catered to problems of people like Yehudi Menuhin was not interested in learning yoga. Clifford Curzon was not interested in learning yoga. The musicians that he taught or the luminaries that he taught, they were not interested in learning the subject of yoga. They wanted solutions for their problems. So he did not teach yoga to Menuhin. He taught him, therefore, Menuhin rightly says on the wristwatch, my best violin teacher. He doesn't say my best yoga teacher. He said my best violin teacher. Because Guruji realized that he wants to be playing violin, and therefore he taught him, which is going to help him in playing concerts and playing his music without hassles. Because otherwise he had a lot of nervous problems during the World War II. He was extensively traveling. post 45, 1945. And so there was complete breakdown in nervous system for him. He wanted to overcome that. And Guruji was helping him for that purpose. He was not teaching Chitta Vritti Nirodha Yoga. He was not trying to teach the classical yoga. So none of them, luminaries, prior to certification, he was teaching only the luminaries, the musicians or whatever, or the queens and the heads of the state. He was teaching even the ambassadors in various countries. He was even teaching American ambassador in India. But then he was not teaching yoga. He was trying to cater the consumer yoga. So that took a long kind of chunk of his teaching post certification, which was say post 1970. And therefore his teaching radically changed. Even the later generation in India, like say Abhijata and these youngsters, the Rayas, etc., he was trying to guide them how to become teachers, because he wanted them to become teachers in institute. And therefore, more than giving importance for them to become students, he said they should become students on their own. I will try to teach them help in teaching. So he would be guiding Abhijatas and whatever teachers, Rajashmis, and who were taught in the institute. He was trying to do the polishing in their teachings. He would say, don't say this way, say that way. Take the asana this way, not that way. So that came later when he was not teaching. He was 85, more than 85 years old. So then teaching for these new generation in India also changed. They should have understood that they were supposed to become students of yoga. I don't know how far they became students, how far they understood that they should become students of yoga. So anyway, that was important thing, because many of them say this was not taught to us by Guruji, which I teach. Therefore, many of them tag me, I am a different teacher. When they say I am different than my father, they are critical about it. They say, you don't teach like him. They expect me to teach like him. And therefore, it's a grudge, it's a complaint that they have when they say, I'm teaching differently. It's not that they're giving me merit or credit that I'm teaching differently. They have some kind of grudge, because they expect that I should be teaching what Guruji taught them, so that is ratified for them. They will be teaching the same way. But then I embarked upon education in yoga in last nearly 10, 12 years. So I started giving some precepts and concepts and ideas and peep into classical subject of yoga, why something is done classically. And therefore, they did not get from Guruji, but his light on life should not have come with after light on yoga. But then if so many lights here to cast, light on yoga, light on pranayam, light on yoga sutras, light on ashtanga yoga, light on pranayam, then light on life. Because he had much to say, which he could not say to his students. So they should have learned that lesson, that Guruji wants to say something more, which he cannot do in a class situation. In class situation, he wanted them to be getting resourced, well-resourced in what they are going to teach once they go back. So he wanted them to become good teachers in the sense what is expected out of certification. So that was at the back of the mind, and therefore he identified the priority. He said, if you want to learn yoga, you come and stay with me. Try to talk with me. In the class, many things cannot be taught. Now you have experienced this. What I do on Saturday evening, I cannot be doing all that in a class situation. The class has a framework. And in that framework, all these things don't come. So Guruji's workshops of 2 or 3 days or a week could not cover all these matters which he was wanting to convey, but he could not do because of this compressed program, a convention, a 3-day retreat, 4 days retreat, 1 week retreat. We cannot package yoga that way, but he had to do that. And therefore, he gave priority to help teachers. Most of his foreign students are teachers. actual teachers or potential teachers, professional teachers or would-be teachers. That's how the West has taken up to yoga. And that's why he had to teach that way. Well, that was not my case. I was just teaching in the institute. I did not travel. So I could have continuum in my flow, what I taught last class, what I taught last week, what I taught last month. I could pick up from there and have a flow. That doesn't happen in retreat of 3 days and 5 days and 7 days. We have to package it. Now, if you package it, you will have to exclude so many things. So Guruji had to do a lot of packaging in his teachings when he came to West. He did not do the packaging when he was teaching in India, in Pune, in Mumbai. Of course, in Pune, he stopped teaching almost. After the institute came up, he said, you take up myself and Geeta. So he was not teaching classes after inauguration of the institute 50 years back. He said, you take care of it. I will teach only intensives. What is the intensives? The would-be teachers, actual teachers who will be going back, and their priority is to teach Iyengar yoga back. So therefore, Iyengar's yoga did not get highlighted, and I wanted to do that. And that is what I am doing last 20 years. Not Iyengar yoga, but Iyengar's yoga, which he could not do it because of his whole scheduling in his life and priorities that came his way. He had to do a lot of spade work for the yoga to be spread all over the world. Now, I'm working on superstructure of yoga. I don't have to do the spade work. The institution is already there. The people are already familiar with yoga, and he has already created appeal for yoga. So I can be teaching the structure of yoga, edifice of yoga, whereas he had to do all spade work. So that was an unfortunate thing in his life. If somebody else had done the spade work, and then he had to, if he was teaching, then it would have been different. But he had to do all spade work, infrastructural work. Most of his energies were consumed in that. And therefore, his teaching in the West was totally different. Now, it doesn't happen in India, because in India, they were learning from me and Geeta right from last 50 years. So there was nothing like different, because we were teaching Indians. But Westerners being taught, being taught by Guruji, then coming to us, coming to be was a turnaround. And therefore, they ended saying, I'm teaching differently. So Guruji was committed for what he had decided, a mission in his life, that yoga should be propagated. And therefore, he had to go a particular way. The teaching yoga for teachers became more important rather than yoga for students. Whereas I don't teach for teachers, I teach for students. I'm doing for last more than 50 years. I'm not having anybody as understudy as a teacher. I don't encourage anyone to become teacher. I said become good students. Because that popular Iyengar yoga does it. It turns out it popularizes yoga. It takes the yoga to nook and corner of the world. It goes to all the various countries. So those people are doing. So why should I do that now? So I was more privileged, and which Guruji could not be doing. That's why he was talking to them. They were more interested in library session than class session. Lee can testify this. They want to do their life spending 2-3 hours in library with him, because they knew that it's a mat yoga in a class for 2.5 hours, mat yoga. So there was nothing kind of informal aspect. But in library, it was more informal. And therefore, much of yoga, those who were going to him and meet in library, they got some kind of idea of what yoga is. Yoga is a philosophy. Which teacher teaches philosophy of yoga? It's only asana, pranayam, technical, physical culture, remedial culture. That's what they teach. But Guruji had much to convey, but he did not have the opportunity. Okay.
Well, what we mistakenly did with what Guruji gave us was to assume that philosophy would spring from us taking certain physical positions, asanas, etc. Whereas actually, obviously, the practices, the asana pranayama, they come down from the subject matter itself. And that's a difficulty, Guruji can't be faulted with that. He probably overestimated our what we would do with it. He thought that we would become students of yoga and not just stick to how to keep someone in a certain position for 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, and tell them about their knees and all of that. And so I feel bad that we did that with what Guruji gave us, because he did give us much. And we didn't dig far. We didn't dig further. And he was there as a resource for us whenever we did want to dig further, actually. If we ever talked to him, he unveiled to us important things about the subject itself and the philosophy itself.
And he had to make an attractive package. He had to make attractive package to teach in New York for 2-3 days, or Washington is 2-3 days, or Kansas 2-3 days, London 3-4 days. So he had to make the package very attractive and perfectly justifiable. And therefore, they got carried away with the attractive package of what Guruji taught. And the essence of yoga cannot come in such a short kind of 2-3 days workshop or a week, etc. It's a lifelong thing, and one should be leisurely into yoga. Now, as I said the other day in the class, he often told us that he was practicing 8-10 hours. Now, I said it is impossible to practice 8-10 hours of yoga. What is our idea of Iyengar yoga? You would be dead in the first day itself. It is a killing practice, meticulous about perfection, precision, etc., etc., and then getting exhausted. So find out the idea of Iyengar yoga. Can you practice for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day? It is such a serious matter physically that you cannot be doing. So he said he was practicing 8-10 hours. Actually, what he was doing, that he was an observer. But he could not clarify that I was observing, I was experimenting, but he said I was practicing. It is not possible to practice physical yoga for 8 hours and 10 hours continuously for some weeks and months and years. But he did. He was not practicing. But he could not articulate. He said actually he was observing, he was experimenting. See, today, if I say we are doing forward bends, you will first of all stretch your legs, hamstrings, and back, and extend your the trunk for forward bends. You will get prepared. But the other day I said in the class, he did not do that. He said, let me see how a very, very rudimentary, raw, postural yoga by a person would be doing. So he would come in a stiff condition and get to straightaway Paschimottanasana. Not impose on quadriceps, not impose on hamstring, not impose on back, stretch, elongate, extend. No imposition. He said, let me see how long does it take for the body to yield. So he would doing like a novice would be doing. Nobody would like that Paschimottanasana that Guruji did at the very inception. He did not force. He said, let me see without forcing how a bad students of so-called Iyengar yoga would be doing, resistant, not motivated. So some of you might be finding that you are not motivated to do forward bends as you are motivated to do back bends, and vice versa case. So he would try to understand what is the plight of a person who is not motivated to do forward bends, who is not disposed to do forward bends, who is having a lot of resistance, a lot of stiffness, a lot of problems are encountered. Let me see. So he would just wait and watch how a very body resisting person would be trying to endeavor for Paschimottanasana or Urdhvanasana. Just come from somewhere and somewhere try to Urdhvanasana straight away, not get prepared in the back. Today we get prepared and do our asanas. So he many times was observing, let me see how unprepared person has a plight in doing back bends or forward bends. So he was trying to emulate that person and he was trying to not impose, just see whether the resistance is slowly fading out and how it can fade out. So he was experimenting, was observing stiff back. If you are having stiff back for back bends, we don't like to do it. But he was trying to observe the stiff back and not provide some kind of antidote to stiff back and get prepared. Let me see how the stiff back slowly yields. What is the process? So he was most of the time observing. He was most of the time experimenting. And that is not exhaustive. To observe is not will not exhaust you. To experiment will not exhaust you, but doing will exhaust you. And most of us have this idea, asana is doing. We cannot imagine 8 hours of practice. Our practice ends in at the most 2 hours or 2.5 hours. We cannot be doing for more longer duration. But because we do not know, it is an observatory. We are observatory. We are laboratory. We are academy. Let's try to learn. So Guruji was learning through the body on a day. Not that every day he was having body under control. Sometimes the body would resist for forward bends or back bends or twistings. So he would see how to handle, how to experiment with such a body. He would not get prepared by imposing, etc., by will or matter. He was not doing it every time. We want to get prepared and then do the asanas. He was not getting prepared. He was getting even oppositely prepared and try to do an asana. Get prepared for back bends and go to forward bends. Will you do it? No. Get prepared for forward bends and go to back bends. Will you do it? No. So he tried all those things to understand stiff people, weak people, those have resistance for postural yoga. And from that, he learned so many things about body, mind, breath, psyche, consciousness.
He passed that along to us too. You know, if we were too starstruck by him to sometimes to see where he would give leniency to people in terms of the position of their body. And we thought that his yoga was all about the position of the body. I mean, I remember a time when there was, I think he was maybe a Polish man who was in the class, and Janushirshasana, and he just stopped the class and he said, look at this fellow, he can't move forward with his right leg bent back in Janushirshasana. You're insisting, you know, he's talking basically to the whole class. You're insisting that his right heel come all the way back to his right groin and his right knee go back behind his right hip in order for him to stretch forward over his left leg. And he's not going to get a forward bend out of that. You know, Guruji could see that and explain it so easily, so quickly to us. Okay, give him a little leniency with where that foot and that knee is, and let him go forward in Janushirshasana over his left leg. You know, like I say, we were sometimes too starstruck by Guruji.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, you know, with the advent of green, the sticky mat, we are obsessed with sticky mat. See, you should not use a sticky mat when you are doing forward bends. Because you require to mobilize the back of the legs in your forward bends, and in sticky mat, whichever part is stuck, is touching the mat, is not prepared to move. The sticky mat is okay for standing poses when your feet are on the floor and you don't want the feet to slip. But we are obsessed with sticky mat, with the advent of sticky mat, and now for every asana we use a sticky mat. We should not be using sticky mat.
And people hearing this also should know that when the term green mat comes up, there's a reason that it was called a green mat back in the first days. And now there's every color in the rainbow of the mats. I mean, it was
and
the green.
Unfortunately, it's called yoga mat. It's called yoga mat. This is highly unfortunate, very unfortunate. Actually, those mats were manufactured to go under the carpets.
Yes.
The carpets won't slip.
And Angela's
yoga mat.
Angela's father introduced those to Guruji, right?
Yeah.
He had some experience in the carpet industry or something like that. And all of a sudden, in fact, when I first came to the Institute, we didn't have any of those green mats. Or there were two of them. There were two of them in the Institute or something. We just lined up for standing poses on the lines on the floor, on the slate floor.
Correct.
And then after a couple of years, all of a sudden there's this great amount of these green mats. So people should know that when they hear you say green mat, that's what they're referring to. Yeah, that changes.
And actually, we did backbends on blankets. We want the feet to slip, so that we will know where to hold, where to grip. For Viparit Dandasana, it is convenient to do on a sticky mat because your feet don't slip, your elbows don't slip. And therefore, they don't develop the intelligence to be firm. So whereas we were spreading the cotton mats lengthwise, and we did backbends on it. So feet were slipping, prone to slipping. Elbows were prone to slipping. But we were trying to stabilize them. The sticky mat doesn't need stabilization. The mat itself stabilizes your elbow and feet. So you don't learn the stability dynamics, aspects of dynamics by getting onto sticky mat because the elbows won't slip, feet won't slip. Or we just had a blanket for head and feet on the floor. The mat should not, blanket under the head should not slip. So we had to put pressure so that the blanket will not slip when the legs are stretched. So we learned certain knacks and skills by not going for conveniency of sticky mat. The sticky mat is a non-yogic mat, but it has been called yoga mat. Very, very unfortunate. It's an exercise mat. It is good for floor exercises, but it has become yoga mat. Anyway, okay. Anything else? Let's proceed.
Well, I had a couple questions. One is when Guruji was doing all the traveling, going to Europe and the United States and all the places he went, China, etc. Did he enjoy that type of travel and seeing the world, or was it very taxing on him?
No, one thing is that his philosophy of life is never to have grudge in what one has to do. Be contented and satisfied with what one has opted to do, not try to critically assess the things, not suitable, etc., etc. So he never had a grudge. Basically, he had nature to travel. He wanted journeys. He enjoyed traveling, and so that was a plus point.
He was the best guest ever. He was the best guest ever. He was the perfect guest. And he was, in fact, the perfect host, too. All of the things, the special days that we would have at the Institute, and there would be, so many groups of people, as many non-Indians who could come would come, and then all of the Indians would be there as well. And hosted by Guruji and the family, a meal, a beautiful meal, on all of these long tables, 1,000 people, and Guruji would get around to every one of those tables, and every little group of people, the old people, the young people, the new people, the experienced people, and he would make us all feel like we were his special guest there. He was the best host and the absolute best guest. When he came to and stayed with us, for those 3 days in 1987, it was just perfect. Kristen and I were sort of put down in a basement room in the bed and breakfast that we were staying in. And Guruji and some of the more senior people were up at the top, on one of the top bedrooms, nice bedrooms up there. And Guruji, he'd come down to visit with Kristen and I. He would sit on the bed with us and watch the evening news. He would come down there and practice with us rather than just stay up in his room. He was just the best. He'd come in the kitchen when I was cooking food, and he would show me, no, this is parota. You're making parota when really you're trying to make chapati. So he collared Nita, who was there with him, and said, "Here, Nita, help this guy." And it was just, he was perfect, absolutely perfect.
Yeah, and initially when we gave party for 300 people in our annual day, Guruji's birthday, it was all homemade food. In earlier part, later, could not do that, so we had a caterers. But until 1985, it was all homemade food for 300 people. My sisters and we had Guruji's elderly friend who was a very good cook, and he would come and do it. He was a bearded person, Guruji's friend from his bachelorhood in Pune. Before Guruji got married, he was a friend. They stayed together for some time. So he was in institute until he died in the 90s, early 90s. He was cooking, my sisters, and we would be helping him. And we prepared homemade food for those 200-300 plus people. We never engaged caterers.
Sometimes in those years, we had an apartment that was up above, and so we could actually look down there and see that little group of 8 or 10 people cooking for what was going to be a meal for 400. Evening. It was just beautiful. I mean, and your mention now of Guruji having this friend, this old friend, bearded friend, it reminds me of what you told us once about Guruji having those friends from his pre-celebrity days before Guruji came, a guy who was known all over the world, and they would come to play cards with Guruji on the weekend when he had a little free time, and they would sit around and play cards. This story was just beautiful. We don't have that on tape, actually.
Yeah. So his friends from his native place who had settled in Pune, they were coming to him and playing cards. He was never showing that he was yoga practitioner or yoga teacher or etc. He would be just treating them as friends, and they were enjoying playing cards for 6-7 hours on weekends.
I would guess he really enjoyed that time too, to not have to be teaching yoga. Another question that has been on my mind since our very first interview, you told the story of when Krishnamacharya came to the house in Pune, and you were speaking with him about yoga philosophy, and then he talked to Guruji and expressed, that he was impressed with your studies of the Upanishads, but that he said, don't let him study, I'm going to say it wrong, Mandukya, the Upanishad with the two.
Mundaka Upanishad. Mundak. Not Mandukya, Mundak.
Mundaka Upanishad.
Yeah.
And you said, well, I've already studied it. Yeah. But my curiosity is, why would he not want you to study that one?
Because he thought that I might become an ascetic. I might renounce the family life, and I might renounce the worldly life, and might go into Himalayas and become a sannyasi or something. So Mundaka means to shave the head and become an ascetic. Munda Upanishad. So he said that's a Upanishad which speaks about higher levels of spirituality, and therefore at this age you should not read it. So take care that he doesn't look into it.
Well, it was too late.
Yeah. Munda means to shave the head. Who does shave the head? One is going to isolation in our culture. One who is going to go for isolation, sannyas, would shave the head and leave the family, abandon the family and go away.
Well, good thing you didn't do that.
Okay.
Prashant lives a life where he has both of those sides. He has his ascetic nature and his ascetic way of life, and at the same time dealing with the people. And so you're caught between two worlds, sir.
No, but he suggested, Guruji suggested, because it was I was in not a mature stage of life to read that. Hey, once you are matured, you can be imbibing principles of Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita. So he was afraid that in the tender age, if I read it, then I might misconstrue. Unless I am matured, I should not look into Vedanta and Brahma Sutra and Mundaka Upanishad. So that was his idea, and perfectly right. It was perfectly right. I was definitely not matured when I was a teenager. So naturally, he gave that advice, or I was not even, I was near about 13, 14 years of age. Perfect right for him to advise that I should not look into such serious texts. Unless I am matured and I have some kind of understanding of life, I should not abandon the life. That was his view. We should understand the life and then think of abandoning the life if that is right for us. But then we realize abandoning a life is not necessary. We can be in the life and not yet in the life. Be in the life. We can be not in it, yet in it. Like Padma Patra Ivambasa, lotus petal in water, untouched by water. So it's needing maturity that lotus lives in mire, lotus is in water, but untouched. So that requires some maturity. So he was perfectly right. I am immature. So I might venture to look into those texts and misconstrue.
But you were busy following that guy who walked all over Pune, talking to no one, or talking to himself, and you followed him around on your bicycle. You remember you told us that story once, and you spent hours upon hours after Susan. So it's one of these guys who every town has one, right, Susan, who walks around the city and talks and loudly to himself and is telling stories or seemingly having conversations with someone else. And Prashant on his bicycle has this idea: who is this man? Who is he talking to? Where is he going? So Prashant took it upon himself to follow this guy all around Pune in his bicycle.
True.
I love these stories.
Yes, me too. Did you ever speak with him? Or did you just watch him?
No. He was a lunatic person. So I wanted to see what is the destination of a lunatic person. Where does he go? So I was trying to chase him.
I'll tell you one quick story about Guruji and travel.
Okay.
When he was here in Minnesota with us, and he stayed 3 days, and then he was on his way to Boston to teach the convention at Harvard. So, and Guruji's last stop in the United States was there in Minnesota, and then we took him out to the airport for him to catch his flight to Boston. And he would be teaching the convention at Harvard. And that gave us all the chance to say, I went to Harvard, because we all went out to the convention at Harvard. So anyway, we brought him out to the airport, and those are the days before 9/11, and when anyone could walk all around the airport and go to the gates and see their traveling friends off, and so we went in and sat down at the gate, waiting for the flight to board, Guruji's flight to board. And Kristen and Guruji sitting down next to each other at the gate. You know how the chairs are there. You share an arm of the chair even, And so they're waiting, and we were talking, Guruji and Kristen talking to each other, and I'm standing alongside of them. And then this woman walks up and sees Kristen and says, I noticed your T-shirt. We had some T-shirts made, and there was a small logo with Virabhadrasana 1 shape on it. It's just a small one up in the top breast area. And she said, Are you going to the convention in Boston? And Kristen said, well, we're not here to catch that flight. but we're going to go out tomorrow. We're just here to see our friend off. And Guruji is sitting there with, like I say, basically arm in arm with Kristen. And this woman is looking at Kristen and talking to her. And this woman, is catching a connecting flight from Minneapolis on to Boston to go to the convention. And during this time, when she's talking to Kristen, she had no idea that there was this man sitting next to Kristen. And all of a sudden, her eyes glanced over that way, and she looked and she said, no, you're not. You can't be. No. Yes, you are. You're. And Guruji, he just, the way he is, kindly smiled to her and sort of welcomed her there. And here she was, she was busy with Kristen's T-shirt, and there he was right next to her, the guy who she was going to go and be studying with for the next 5 days at Harvard. It was a classic, beautiful moment.
A good story. Okay.
No, it's a good talk. We appreciate it very much.
Very much. Very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaskar.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to On the Light. Stay with us as we continue to unfold the life's work of BKS Iyengar and the auspicious subject of yoga. Today, I leave you with this quote from Guruji. When we free ourselves from physical disabilities, emotional disturbances, and mental distractions, we open the gates to our soul. Until next time, shine bright.